Welcome back to the Radio of Horror show. Tonight on Radio of Horror, we have a Canadian Siberian Gothic artist, musician on the show with us, Alia Synesthesia on the show. Thank you for coming on with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
She has a brand new EP out that is addressing a topic that is perhaps typically very opposite of what music is supposed to do. She deals with the inability to feel pleasure, and that is from the press release. Is defined as conceptually explores this as a not only as a decontextualization nebulous tendrils of clinical depression, but as everyday side effects and mental battles for purpose and meaning within the grinding cult of productivity. So in layman's terms, explain to the audience what that means for anyone who's just not quite picking up on what that means.
Yeah, sure. So basically in a society, there's a lot of pressure, especially like in a professional world, to perform, to produce, right? I mean, artists talk about this at length as well. There's a lot of pressure on independent artists to constantly keep generating releases, because that will simply like boost their ratings on Spotify if they constantly produce music. It will keep them relevant in like Google and Facebook algorithms. I mean, the same thing really is in the non-artistic world as well. There's a lot of pressure to perform, produce, be productive. And obviously as humans, like we're not machines, right? I mean, machines break as well, but we can't constantly be productive, right? So this album essentially explores what it's like to drive productivity to the extreme. And often basically constant pressure to produce and perform results in something like a depression, basically anhedonia, which is a psychological term. It essentially it's a depression of sorts. It's a sign of a depression, and it concerns the inability to feel pressure, basically numbing yourself down. Hope that helps.
How many albums have you released?
To date, because I have more than one project, I think my total album count at this point, maybe not album, but total release count, about 9 releases. I released about 3 albums under the name Subterranea. It's my first release under Alia Synesthesia. And I also play with the band Attrition, so I'm featured on Attrition tracks as well. Yeah, and before I went solo, I was a part of a band called Slut Mother, and we have about 3 releases, I think, in total. Yeah, but there's also singles, anonymous EPs, and stuff like that. Yeah, so in total, it would be about 9 releases at this point.
Wow, that's incredible.
I am productive.
The inability to feel pleasure, that sounds horrifying.
I mean, it is pretty horrifying, to be honest. Like the idea of exploring anhedonia actually came to me from a conversation with my brother.
What is this? So this is, I mean, this is like a real medically diagnosed thing of just not being able to feel happy or feeling pleasure, like in how exactly?
Well, basically, from what I understand, because I've read quite a few of like academic articles on it, my brother has anhedonia. He describes it as, yeah, just nothing really matters to you. Like, just there's no things that bring pleasure anymore, things that you used to enjoy doing, but you no longer feel anything about them.
So this could be anything from like eating ice cream to watching your favorite movie to even sexually.
Yeah.
That sounds horrible. I mean, that would be, I mean, I guess in a lot of ways, that's what depression does. Depression kills your pleasure, your pleasureness of anything, really.
Yeah. But I mean, there's a range of different other psychiatric disorders that would have similar symptoms of anhedonia. Not only depression, but yeah.
Go into a lot of information about the horror and opera score that you did for Haxan,
yeah.
Haxan.
Yeah, so I guess as a kid, I was really drawn to horror pretty much all the time. and I am classically trained. I'm a classically trained operatic singer. I started in Russia, I continued here. So basically, I started this venture. It's called Horror in Opera, where I do live soundtracks or compose soundtracks to older horror silent films. And Haxan was the first film that I released very, very recently. So the soundtrack was ready in August, pretty much, like last month. I kickstarted it, and Kickstarter was actually, surprisingly to myself, really successful. So I think I will just continue doing this. I mean, I really enjoy early horror, like silent films, and that's kind of a known thing that silent films, even though they do have soundtracks, they often don't have like just one composer that writes the soundtrack, because they were meant to be performed live. So when you have a silent film playing and the live composer playing something on top of it, that's how it historically was the case. Yeah, so there's a lot of creative grounds there to explore and redefine, and I really enjoy that. The movie, well, it's called Haxan or Witchcraft Through Ages. It was made in 1922 by Benjamin Christensen, and it's technically part kind of like research into witchcraft and part, I guess, a fantastic film, exploring what it was like to be branded a witch during the Middle Ages. So yeah, it's a kind of a combinational genre, I think, between like a documentary essay and the horror movie. It became cult classic eventually. It is in Criterion Collection. There were several restorations recently done for this movie. Yeah, so I mean, the first time I ever seen it, I think, was in the venue. They played it as a background to just the bar music, and I was like, oh, what's that? And yeah, this is where the bartender told me, this is Haxan. It's like super known. I'm like, oh, interesting. Yeah, so overall it's about 2 hours of music, and because it's a 2-hour long film.
Where can people find this film? Is it out yet?
It actually will be out on October 14th for essentially for purchase. Right now, the film is only limited to the Kickstarter pre-orders, but as soon as we'll ship them all. Basically, I'll make the movie publicly available, and everyone will be able to find it on horrorandopera.com, which is the site for this project.
I was looking up the trying to find the IMDb for it when you were talking about it, when we were talking about it through email, and I couldn't find it. All I could find was the one from 1922. Fictionalized documentary showing the evolution of witchcraft from its pagan roots to its confusion with hysteria in Europe, directed by Benjamin Christen. Again, this movie is from 1922.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is a silent horror film from 1922, yeah.
Oh, it's the same movie?
Yeah, I don't think there can be re-releases on IMDb for the movie with a new soundtrack, can there? The movie itself is in the public domain at this point.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, they show a lot of the depictions of the devil I've seen, I think, come from this movie. They got like a statue or some guy dressed up as a devil. It looks like a naked woman in front of him, and then the devil behind a nun in a position that you can only look online and try and figure out what they're doing. I don't want to... it's sexual in nature, people. And the colorful, like, black and red and blue, you know what I mean? It's not your typical kind of... This is, I remember... Okay, I have seen snippets of this in, like, other horror movies, or when I went to, like, a goth club, they would play clips of this at the club. I don't think I've ever seen this from beginning to end, but this is like one of those movies that I've heard about to no end that was just so controversial for 1922.
Yeah.
Today, you release this in theaters, you're going to be like, oh, that's just like Hereditary. Oh, that's like The Witch. Oh, whatever. I saw that last week. My son has seen that.
Yeah, I mean, it was mostly controversial because of the position that it took. Essentially, the whole point of the movie is that witchcraft doesn't really exist, and there's a bunch of...
Witchcraft doesn't really exist. That's funny.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point is that there's a lot of different psychological issues that were branded as, you know, oh, she's a witch because she's mentally ill, or she's a witch because she's poor. But yeah, I mean, it's a fairly progressive point for the 1922. And also, actually, the film is not as sexual in nature as you might just like you might think just by looking at the screenshot. And I agree that those screenshots are pretty compromising. But so the person that dresses up as a devil, this is the director himself. This is Benjamin Christensen.
Ah, yes, I say that in the credits.
Yeah, and I feel like some of those scenes are very comical in nature as well. So maybe they were kind of, maybe those scenes inspired some slapstick comedy later. But yeah, I really recommend you to watch it. It's a really awesome movie. I really enjoyed it.
Wow, there's yeah, and for more information about the film itself, anyone listening, you can go to, you know, just type in the name of the film. I'm sure the original copy of the film, since the most silent, I think all silent films are in public domain, you can find it on YouTube very easily. Do you want to score more films in the future?
Yes, there are actually already a couple of movies, not really in the works, but I'm choosing which one I'm going to be doing next. Between Vampire, which is, I believe, 1932.
Oh, you're going to do Vampire?
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's also in the public domain. And the other one I was considering was Nosferatu.
That would be very cool. Yeah, I mean, Vampire, I saw like one time during COVID last year. It was on HBO Max, and I was like, okay, sure, I'll finally watch this. And I've seen Nosferatu numerous times.
Yeah, I like both movies. They both kind of have very interesting portrayal of the gothic and the supernatural and the horror itself. Like, that's what I really love early silent movies for. They do have different copyright histories, though. I believe Nosferatu is still not in the public domain, which is kind of interesting.
It's not in the public domain?
No, I mean, it is in the United States. But
yes, it is in the United States, I was going to say.
Yeah, but not in Germany somehow, and not in some places in Europe. So.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, one of the most famous silent films ever, somebody, you know, supposedly years ago, Henry Knowles of Any Cool News supposedly said he found a copy of it, but I've never found a single update on that story. But London After Midnight.
Oh, sorry, come again? What's the name of it?
Have you heard of London After Midnight?
No, I never heard of it. Interesting.
It stars Lon Chaney Sr. He dresses up. He's a detective. He's a detective that dresses up as a vampire to infiltrate the criminal underworld to find out about some stuff. And all copies of the film were supposedly destroyed. And anyone alive today who says they've seen it is probably misremembering or lying, because what they saw was on TNT in the 2000s, they put together a 45-minute cut of the movie using stills from the film with the original soundtrack, and that's all that exists. You can buy this like DVD on Amazon with like a Lon Chaney Sr. collection of his other films. But this one aired a couple times on Turner Classic Movies, the cable channel, as just stills, and the title cards that come up during silent films. And then the soundtrack. It was about 45 minutes.
Oh, wow, interesting. Do you know why it was destroyed?
It was destroyed in a warehouse fire.
Oh, I see. So it's not like a purposeful destruction.
No, this was, there were like hundreds of copies of films that were destroyed in this MGM fire in the 60s. And no known copy of London After Midnight is known to exist. Hardcore film collectors don't have it. There might be some film vaults in Europe that have never been explored. I actually, no joke, wanted to come up with a documentary short film vignette of series of shorts about a archaeological film student that went on a quest to find London After Midnight. And it was supposed to be played for laughs, but it was supposed to go into like to the history of the movie. The problem is I could never find a way to like figure out how to film it, get the budget together. I really need to partner with somebody on it. But I thought it would be very cool that this, film student, she goes on like, Indiana Jones style adventures looking for a copy of London After Midnight.
That sounds really cool. Like, I'd love to see it.
I would love to have seen it too if I had made it. I came up with the idea for it like way back in like 2008, before everybody was making streaming and everyone was making YouTube content or making like mini series online. And I was like inspired by a couple people doing it, but it wasn't that big yet. And then I was just like, oh, I'll do this one day. Years later, I still haven't done it.
Well, maybe soon. Maybe soon. You know,
Maybe, I don't know. I really need to figure out like people that are going to volunteer to do this kind of thing. You know what I mean? The budget alone is just would be very crazy.
You can survive in some other form, like make a video game about it.
Making a video game is still something that would cost a lot of money and not as cheap as you think it would be. Making a video game is a lot more expensive sometimes than making a short film.
It can be, yeah, it depends.
Talk about, now, do you play solo by yourself or do you have other people playing with you?
For my solo projects, I play solo. I did experiment in the past before with having like sessional musicians with me on stage, but this can be a little iffy. Also because, you know, you have to match up with everyone's schedules. Plus, if you go on tour, like I can't afford taking other people with me, unless they pay for themselves, which, you know, it's kind of hard. It's a hard thing to ask for from others. But when I play with attrition, like we play, like there's 2 to 3 people on stage at any given time.
That's awesome. Where can people go to listen to more of your music and find you on social media?
Yeah, I do have a Bandcamp. So it's Alia Synesthesia Music. It's a kind of umbrella Bandcamp for pretty much everything right now. And if you're more interested in the neoclassical operatic dungeon synthy project I have, which is Subterranea, there is a Bandcamp for this as well, Subterranea Witch, bandcamp.com. Yeah, I also have a website, aliasynesthesia.com, and pretty much my social handles would be my Alia Synesthesia. So facebook.com/Alia Synesthesia, and same for all my socials, to be honest.
Fantastic. Well, I really do appreciate you coming on the show to talk a little bit about the film that you're working on and the music that you did for it, as well as a little bit about your own, you know, mental health and your what your music means to you and such. I do appreciate it, and we will be definitely playing your music.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Always pleasure talking about music and creative stuff.